We've got another episode of world building and game design with Evil Twin Skippy. And today we're going to cover character calculus with our color based, color wheel based character archetypes. This is a friends we made along the way sort of video. I didn't set out to write this one, but it just kind of emerged from a project I was doing to create a short for each of the 12 archetypes. I wanted to have example characters. But in searching through the bits of pop psychology that is on the internet, I had to pick through the AI spam and the SEO spam, and you get down to the bottom and they give you a list of 3 characters and it's wrong and they might as well have been pulled out of a hat. Yeah, it was a bit of a struggle, but I did find this gem of a resource. Now, I'm going to warn you, it's like TV tropes. Go here, expect to lose your lunch hour. But if you can, it is every character you can think of, from television, books, movies, comics, everybody's here. And they all have these little stat blocks with their Myers-Briggs temperament and the Enneagram. Now, I've got a history with Myers-Briggs. It's kind of useless, in my humble opinion, because you really can't tell anything from these things, and most people end up finding that they're a blend of a bunch of other things, and it just, we're going to ignore it for now. But the Enneagram is actually somewhat useful. Now, for our purposes, you have to remember we turn the Enneagram 90 degrees to make it line up with our color wheel. And the other thing to remember is that you're a number in the Enneagram, but you're a number with a wing. So a 9-wing 1 is a 9 who leans towards a 1. A 9-wing 8 is a 9 who leans towards an 8. They're 2 different personalities, but they're centered around the 9. We can use this to develop a sort of lookup table. Now, it's a little bit awkward because we break our circle up into 12. They break their circle up into 9. And then with the wings, it's 18. Things don't line up, but if you squint real hard, you can kind of devise a pattern. And so I just have this simple little lookup table to help map an Enneagram wing to our 12 character archetypes. So let's pick a simple example. Sherlock Holmes from the books. There's not a lot of characters in Sherlock Holmes. There's Sherlock and Watson, the villain of the week. And you kind of get the sense that a lot of the characters are Arthur Conan Doyle kind of speaking through a sock puppet. But that's just the style of story he was telling. And it was very successful. Now, when they adapted it for television, a lot of the characters got moved around for script writing purposes. But we see the influence of Sherlock Holmes even in movies made a century later. Here's Blade Runner, that essentially has a very similar cast calculus to Sherlock Holmes. But it's not a time period thing. Here we've got Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice from 1813, and she has a spectrum of characters. But if you pay attention, there's a pattern. Elizabeth, our main character, is a 6, and most of the side characters are either a 3 or a 9, which Enneagram fans would know as, that would be the stress or the security direction that a 6 would morph into. Lord of the Rings, you don't see this sort of authorship bias. Instead, what you see is it's a main character bias. The main character is Frodo, and the rest of the cast is built around what does Frodo need for storytelling purposes. And this is mirrored with Star Wars. And basically, Luke is the main character. And this isn't random. George Lucas was very heavily inspired by Joseph Campbell. And Joseph Campbell, of course, is the guy who wrote The Hero's Journey. And that book was heavily inspired by Tolkien's Lord of the Rings and his effort to bring back mythic storytelling to at least the English language. And his effort was influenced very heavily by Carl Jung and his use of the mythic characters for psychotherapy purposes and understanding how the mind works. Yes, yes, yes. That Carl Jung from which we get the 12 Jungian archetypes. It's a circle, baby. It's a circle. Getting back to Star Wars. Star Wars was extremely popular, so a lot of franchises kind of copied the same template. Here's Firefly, written 30 years later. Star Trek is very different, but then again, Star Trek was also written very different. It's a cowboy movie that they've just replaced the spaceships. They've replaced the chuck wagons with spaceships. Because it was a very long-running series, and the folks who were writing this were used to things like Wagon Train, where you'd have regular characters coming on and off. Main characters tend to be stuck in a certain track of, okay, you know that this is a main character because they act a certain way, and then the guest stars and the villains tend to be a different one, with Spock being sort of our resident outsider. He's got a personality similar to what a villain or guest star would be, but he's kind of permanently on staff. With Star Trek The Next Generation, it was written at 30 years later for a different style of TV. It was written basically as a soap opera. With Deep Space Nine, we see a very similar of across the spectrum distribution, but they do cluster it up a little bit because it had a very different tone. Down toward the bottom, you see a lot of characters that are our shifty and devious types. And then we also have a lot of supporting characters up in the upper left. Of course, being Evil Twin Skippy, I had to analyze, well, how do the evil twins map in our system? So here's Kira, and she is almost a coin flip from a 6 to a 7. But, oh, what a difference that makes in her personality. And with Data and with Spock, we see it's almost like you put a mirror down the y-axis here, and they are exactly the mirror opposite of what they would be as far as personality goes. Now, with Lore, he's Data's evil twin brother, but with Mirror Spock, of course, that's Spock in the Mirror Universe. And it can also kind of bounce the other way. So here we have Mirror Julian Bashir versus Mirror Worf. They almost switch places, but here it's almost as if the mirror is along the x-axis. And then there's the other evil universe of Star Wars, that's Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and of course we got Babylon 5. Kind of a uniform distribution, kind of space opera, but with a huge cluster of 1s and 9s. But we also had one writer for most of the first season and a good part of the rest. And then we've got The Expanse, which is another space opera, but that's got a kind of a different, darker tone, and we again see a lot of the shiftier characters down here in the lower left. This analysis isn't strictly for space operas. Here we've got Avatar, The Last Airbender, never mind Korra, and we've got a kind of a uniformly distributed set of characters. I did look to see, was there kind of any correlation between personality and bending ability, and the answer is no. One Piece kind of looks a little splotchy. But you've got to realize that, like Star Trek, they have a lot of side characters coming on and off the set as they're working through different storylines, and so they have got these virtue signals of here's the core cast, and here's the allies, and here's the noble adversaries, and the reluctant allies, and the big bads, and the foppish villains, and it helps the audience kind of figure out what sort of character they see by how they act. So let's wrap it all up and put it together. When I just dump everything on the screen, it's really hard to pick anything out. But let's walk through each of our 12 houses here and see if any patterns emerge. So our performers. A lot of these characters are very proper, stiff upper lip, know how to make an entrance, know how to make their selves heard. No argument here. Our rulers, just quick survey of these characters. They're all anal retentive, control freaks, and if you put them in charge, they're kind of a bit of a pain in the ass of a boss to deal with. Our jesters are basically every bit as talented as the rulers. They're just a bit more laid back. And yeah, they got their own thing going. What I can't help but notice is that every ship's doctor, nurse, and therapist is in this zone. It's uncanny. But hey, that's what we're hoping for. Rebels are our shifty characters, our deal makers, our out of the box thinkers, our psychopaths. Masterminds are our chess masters, the guys who are like 9 or 10 steps ahead, or just our really, really smart characters. Now, there's another nifty little thing we find along the way, which is all of our annoying kids are in this slot. So Zuko and Wesley and Julie, just the what are they doing now? And the shut up, Wesley. Artists are our Luffy characters, the introverted genius, the person of mystery and unexplained backstory, and then, at least from a 19th century perspective, our detectives. Philosophers are our resident outsider in an ensemble cast, our mad scientists, or our intellectual protagonist. Explorers are our Watson, our Sam, what TV Tropes calls the Cuckoo's Keeper. Let's take Obi-Wan Kenobi as an example. Yeah, he's a mentor figure in episode 4, but in episode 1 through 3, he was kind of the sweeper after the elephants for Qui-Gon Jinn, and then he turned into the sweeper after the elephants for Anakin Skywalker, and then he kind of had to follow along Luke to get him started on his way. Rights are our improvisers. The engineers, notice how almost all of our ship's engineers are right here. Our ace pilots, we've got our first officers, our right-hand men, and a lot of characters that were just I have a plan, but they had to make it up on the spot. Think of that area as our support staff and managers, our fixers. Custodians are just really colorful characters. We've got our psycho-villainesses, our strong female leads, our bad boy heroes, and our arch-villains. Soldiers are our team players, our leader out in the front, our swashbuckler, our token psychopath, and then sometimes a protagonist sort of character goes evil, and then we've got the dragon, that one that the emperor knows he can send out, and he's going to get the job done because he's just so damn loyal. And finally, the hedonist. We've got our heroic captains, our no nonsense detectives, our refined older gentlemen, our starter heroes, and Miles effing O'Brien, the one man in literature and cinema that I would just love to sit down and have a drink with, and so would just about everybody I know. So we're going to wrap up. We got different genres have different character calculus. Some are defined by kind of the quirks of the people who founded that genre. Blockbusters have really peculiar patterns audiences identify with. Adventure stories tend to focus around certain characters and then just backfill side characters as needed. Dramas have a range of characters that can play off of each other. If you enjoyed this, I post these videos and discussions to my subreddit, r/sublightRPG. And if you want to play around with these ideas on your own, I have a 100-card tarot deck. And the idea is that each one of them is filled with prompts. And it's built around this color-based magic system. And also our 12 house character archetypes. So you can download it for free and print it out on your own or order a professionally made deck. Thank you so much for sticking through to the end, and I will catch you in the next episode.